From Fox, I'm Andy Mack. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to give a little bit more insight into what we know about this 28-year-old woman that is a shooter right here on Live Now from Fox. We're going to bring in Dr. Carole Lieberman, forensic psychiatrist. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. Obviously, a tragic situation out of Nashville today, but we're learning more information. First, just give me your first impressions of what we saw today, and what are your initial takeaways?
Well, a number of things. First of all, it's interesting that they were saying at the beginning that she was a teenager. There were lots of reports that she was a teenager. So one would have to think then that she was perhaps very thin, which would make you think that perhaps she was using drugs. It's so frustrating for everyone when the person isn't identified in a clearer way, or there aren't pictures of her and so on. But so you can only speculate. It is unusual, of course, for a woman, and she was carrying 3 guns, according to the reports that I saw. Bringing 3 guns, it wasn't like it was a very aggressive kind of plan that she had to shoot up the school. You kind of wonder why would somebody do that? Obviously, similar to men, the first things you think of course, is mental illness and childhood trauma, an abusive home when she was growing up. You also think of course, my big thing is for years has been violent video games, because I was the head of the National Coalition on TV Violence, and we studied that, and I testified before Congress about the danger of violent video games. Now, men or boys are more apt to play violent video games than women, but so then you have to think about could there be any socio-political motives? In other words, this isn't just someone who became aggressive playing video games, or was mentally ill and she at random went to the school. For women, it would be more likely that it would be some kind of relationship, either with the school or with someone in the school, that for some reason why she chose that school, rather than just kind of a random act of violence.
Correct, yeah, and it's hard to understand what's going through the mind of a person like this, and I don't want to speculate too much because the details are so fluid at this point. We don't know a ton about this shooter, as 3 children, 3 staff members there killed in Nashville, Tennessee. But I do want to get into the dynamic, because looking at some statistics, obviously males are more likely to do this. I've seen statistics that only 3 female shooters since about 1982 in this, compared to about 135 male shooters in something similar to this. Is there a reason for that? Can we provide a little bit more insight into maybe why that is the case, and why those statistics disparity goes so far toward the males?
Well, for one thing, most of these shootings have been done with guns. I mean, women are less likely to use guns, first of all. Even with suicide, women are less likely to use a gun than a man is. So that's part of it. Of course, also, as I was saying, boys play more violent video games. There is, an attraction to, there's a whole pattern for what makes a school shooter or a mass shooter, which starts out with a destructive home, a dysfunctional home, extremely dysfunctional. It can have exposure to guns. That's another part of it for why it's more men, because typically more fathers will expose their children, their boys, to guns than they would their daughter. It's more this random kind of shooting. Mental illness, of course, is part of that pattern. And there's always something that tips the person off, whether it's a man or a woman. There's at the end of all of this, the dysfunctional childhood and all of this, there is some event that happens that pushes them over the edge. And with women, guns also are, to be really a psychiatrist about all this, guns are a phallic symbol. So men, want to have power, masculine power. And so they are more attracted towards guns. But here's this woman who came in with 3 guns.
Correct.
So, that does defy the odds, the statistics. Of course, as the terrorist therapist, what I have found is that when the media is very hush-hush about the shooter, now, I have no inside information about this, but it's just my experience since 9/11 of examining all of these things and talking about these things and so on, that sometimes it's because the person, they think the person is a radical Islamist terrorist. Now, for a woman that would still be extremely unusual for a woman to do this as a radical Islamist terrorist, but we're only left with guesses here. I just hope, the one thing I can say is that I hope that this isn't, over the years, there have been more women involved in crimes than before. Each year it's more the percentage of women being involved in crimes, I'm not talking about school shootings in particular, but just in general, has increased. There are more women prisoners and so on than were before. So I would hope that this is not, it seems like this is an example of this increase.
Correct.
And I certainly hope that this is not a harbinger of such things to come.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and providing some insight. Dr. Carole Lieberman, we appreciate your insight here on Live Now from Fox. Thanks again.